Hey guys, welcome back. No intro for this one. I had an idea, but it was gonna take a long ass time to film, so expect that fucking meme in the next art style video. Today is the day that we hit the new Forerunner art style hard. It's something that's been an increasing problem for me over the years. I really don't think that 343's Forerunner aesthetic, specifically Halo 5's, works for what it's intended to, like at all. And I know there's quite a lot of people now that feel the same way. However, I do think that this video may be a little more subjective than the last art style video, but by the end of it, I think quite a few of you might find yourself in agreement with me. Just maybe. As a disclaimer, there's this misconception that I've seen flying around that 343's Forerunner architecture is strictly warrior servant, and that Bungie's is strictly builder, and that explains the artistic differences, but that's bullshit. One aesthetic isn't limited to a single Forerunner rate, and this was confirmed by Mr. Grimbrother1 of 343 on Twitter. Also, because the classic art style never saw any Forerunner enemies, of course, aside from the Sentinels, I won't be covering the Prometheans in detail. However, my criticisms do definitely generalise over to the Prometheans and also the Sentinels, so take that as you will. Right, so before we begin criticising 343's Forerunner art style for not serving its intended purpose, what did Bungie do so damn well? Well, I'm glad you asked. Bungie managed to create an architecture and aesthetic that was perfect as an embodiment of ancient mystery that really drove home the idea that humanity aren't the best the galaxy has ever seen. The structures of the Forerunners gave off a feeling of royalty and importance due to their colour schemes and also their sheer size, and in certain cases, it made the Forerunners feel really like members of an ancient, otherworldly religion, praying to something that none of us inferior humans could ever comprehend. The holograms and interactable interfaces weren't just reskins of something that a human would be able to use and operate with ease. They were an array of enigmatic shapes and symbols, with varying colours and outlines, animated to almost feel alive. The ambient sound effects, again, gave off this feeling of ancient mystery, while making the structures feel like they were alive, but not to the extent where it was like, hey look, the walls and floor are moving, the structures are alive, because they're so obnoxiously animated, am I right? In short, Bungie's Forerunner art style was the embodiment of ancient, enigmatic mystery, perfectly fit to a long extinct yet hyper-advanced race. It did all of this without being obnoxious and without screaming out to you. It was subtle, exactly how it should be. So, what's my problem with the new Forerunner art style? The answer is quite a lot. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as the elite design since 343 took over. I just don't think it represents the Forerunners as a race well at all. My main problem is how everything is just so goddamn chrome. The walls, the floors, the ceilings, and just about everything looks polished and newly created. This destroys any feeling of ancientness of the architecture, and never once to me did it feel like any of the structures that I was walking on were created over 100,000 years ago. I'd say that their colour palette resembles this too. Lots of whites, chrome silvers and heavily saturated blues, all really fresh colours, compared to Bungie's decision to use lots of bronze, golds and greys that give off a more, a more antique feeling. This feeling of a long time having passed since these ancient structures were walked upon is thrown out even more when you really look at how polished and weirdly reflected everything is compared to before. Bungie really went for a more matte, clean yet dusty aesthetic, to show that even though this hyper-advanced race likely had mechanisms that would prevent dirt and stuff from clogging up the systems and degrading the structures over time, they still looked really aged. It's this awesome dissonance between the structures looking objectively old and ancient, but at the same time resonating the superior technological capabilities of the Forerunners. The new, pristine, polished and fresh look of the Forerunners' architecture just completely destroys this theme. The dustiness that gave you the ancient vibe is just completely gone, and now everything looks like it was created just yesterday. It feels two-dimensional, not in a literal sense, but in the sense that there's no mystery or character to it. It just feels very stereotypical, I guess you could say. I hate the word stereotypical, but it's the only word that comes to mind. It really does just feel stereotypical of some hyper-advanced race, but you'd never guess that said race had been mostly extinct for over 100,000 years. With the classic Forerunner art style, you could damn well tell that without knowing any of the lore or extra knowledge, that the race that created these structures are long gone. Even though we are fighting the Prometheans now, and the Forerunners are playing a role in the galaxy, you have to remember that the proportion of Forerunners and the Forerunner Empire that are actually in play is absolutely fucking minute. With the way the Halo 5 architecture looks, you'd think the entire race just woke up from the dead and was the most active force in the galaxy again, but they aren't. And this isn't resonated at all in their architecture. This critique follows into my next problem, and that's how alive everything feels, despite the Forerunners being a race mostly extinct by their own creations for over 100 millennia. Now, this liveliness does make sense to a degree, and I totally understand why 343 did it. The ancient race that created all this seemingly dormant architecture are playing a significant role in the galaxy again, and the heavily animated structures and walls are a really good metaphor for this. You know what? In theory, it's actually a fucking genius idea. However, it's flawed beyond belief. If you just looked at the architecture without knowing any expanded universe media or storylines or anything, you'd think the entire race were back in their billions, were the most powerful race in existence and controlled the stars once more. In reality, it's only a tiny, minuscule proportion of the entire empire that have returned. This isn't resonated in the architecture at all. Even on Genesis, a planet that's been totally dormant since the end of the Forerunner Empire, is laden with lively turbines and energy pulses that really make you believe the opposite of reality. However, I do get that 343 could explain this as, well, it's just the planets that you're on that are animated like this, due to there being active life and events taking place on those planets, and them being woken up, so to speak. My problem with this rebuttal is that even if that is the case, it still makes the player think that the Forerunners are fully awake and active again, because they're never given a taste of the more dormant, dusty, and genuinely ancient architecture that Halo 3 gave us, that really resonated this dormancy perfectly. The domain is the only place where the architecture has a reason to be this alive, and it is. Not that I'm a fan of it per se, but given the domain's renewed use, I can totally understand why it's so alive. That, and also that the domain is a precursor creation, meaning that it's literally a living thing. Now again, I'm not a fan of these animated structures and such, but I think it genuinely does make sense in that case. However, me and Late Night Gaming recently devised a way they could bring back the classic Forerunner aesthetic while retaining this feeling of liveliness that 343's aesthetic has. In Halo 5, the suppressor has this really cool effect where, when you zoom in with it, the parts of the gun's chassis that emerge from it vibrate and shudder. Now, although this is subtle, it makes you feel like the weapon is alive, and that the hard light connecting the pieces of metal to each other is like the soul of the weapon, causing the pieces to quiver in reaction to its user's actions. This could be transferred over to, let's say, this block, for example. So, when there's nothing near it, the lights are maybe very dimly lit, and it's a solid block. However, when you get closer, the lights brighten up and the pieces separate and the block opens up slightly, vibrating and emanating a really subtle blue light. Then, when you walk away from it, it recedes back into its original shape. I really feel like this could solve the issue of making these structures feel alive, but not making them feel aggressive and over-designed. And I also think this would alleviate another issue that I have with 343's Forerunner design, the excess of floaty bits. The floaty bits wouldn't be sat there motionless all the time, rather they'd be incorporated into this dormant until approached architecture. There you go, 2 birds, 1 iconic stone. The beauty of the Forerunners for me has always been in their simplicity, the fact that they didn't need to show off with their designs. Wall and ceiling accents were subtle and always felt incorporated into the architecture, like they belonged and had a purpose, whereas now they just feel far too exaggerated and like they're added for no reason. It feels to me like when the Forerunners built some of the architecture in Halo 5, they were almost like, hey, look what we can make, look at all these extra layers of seemingly pointless metal we can add because of how advanced we are, I guess. When in reality they weren't like that, not at all. This in-your-face attitude in the designs severely detracts from the mystery and enigmatic status of the locations that you're fighting in. In Halo 3, equivalent structures left you thinking of the story and the meaning behind even the simplest details like the walls, whereas in Halo 5, the grossly exaggerated accents drown this out by practically screaming in your face, look at how advanced the Forerunners are! And there are some areas that suffer really badly from this, and they feed into my next point, the gross over-designing of almost everything in this art style. For me, the standout example of this is the spawn room on the Breaking. Literally everything, from the floor to the walls to the ceiling, suffers from the problems that I just described, and more. There's simply too much going on, to the point where it's really an eyesore on repeated playthroughs. The floor has a huge rotating turbine, powering an extremely bright blue beam of energy. The walls have massive folds and larger than necessary accents, and the ceiling just... I don't even know what's going on with the ceiling. I feel like the designers just need to sort of chill a little bit with the details and realise that sometimes some empty space and undetailed architecture is a good thing. It's a nice breath of fresh air, and this room just doesn't let you breathe. Let's move on to another problem, this time a glaring one, the lighting. Now, almost every Forerunner light that isn't part of an accent or detail is quite literally blinding. Like, to look at this one, I had to legit put my Ray-Bans on. And it's not just an issue if you stare directly at it either. I found myself multiple times being completely blinded by the lens flares, even during normal playthroughs, where I'm not actively searching for these little nuances. Honestly, sometimes it feels like the Forerunner lighting was done by me in my 2011 optical flare graphics design prime. Jesus, they were some dark days. I think as well, the lighting suffers from the same problems as the accents. They're far too exaggerated and obnoxious. Again, it's like they're screaming at you, look at how advanced we are because of lights and such. Whereas, when you look at Halo 3's, it plays into the subtle tone of the Forerunner architecture perfectly. The lighting is nicely embedded into the walls and accents, and whether it was due to engine lighting limitations at the time or not, the lighting feels natural and subdued, and even sometimes it's not even turned on. I really think this added to the art style's mystery surrounding this long extinct race, whereas in Halo 5 it just feels like it's screaming at you in the face, like I've already described. Halo 3 also used varying colours of light. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I can remember, Colosseum and Tyrant are the only 2 places in the entirety of Halo 5 with Forerunner lighting that isn't blue. They have some reds to indicate red side of the map, along with greens and yellows, but other than those 2 maps, the rest of the lighting and energy is literally just the same hue of blue. Halo 3 incorporated really ancient and almost royal golds into its lighting with grav lifts, along with purple energy beams for different types of lifts, whereas Halo 5 is literally just blue. Overall, the Halo 3 lighting to me just feels superior in both my liking of it and its resemblance of the Forerunners as a race, whereas Halo 5 just feels like they were trying to obnoxiously show off. This issue of lighting feeds into my next point, and to be honest, it's a really picky point, but something I feel oddly strong about: the Forerunner holograms. Now, they're not exactly that prevalent in Halo 5, but when they are, they're in the form of Forerunner consoles that you interact with. The classic art style's version of these always felt very enigmatic, like an array of Forerunner multicoloured symbols and glyphs projected onto an alien pad that you had to interact in some unknown way with, which further played into the mystery of the Forerunners. In Halo 5, these Forerunner terminals are literally just monochromatic Forerunner desktop PCs, complete with keyboard and touchscreen monitor, where you can just play a little game of join the dots. It's really uncreative and bland, something you definitely don't want when you're forced into a really annoying QuickTime event every single time you interact with them. Also, there's nothing really to compare this to in Halo 5, but can we just please take a moment to consider how fucking beautiful this hologram of Bungie's interpretation of a Guardian is? So majestic and royal looking. So, moving on from what graces the vision to the sounds that each Forerunner art style presents. Now, Halo 2 and 3 have a few hidden gems as to locations where you can stand and really appreciate the ambient sounds, the three most notable being Sacred Icon, the Terminal Room on Halo, and Epitaph. On Sacred Icon, you can hear the distant sounds of sentinels being created, while a spine-chilling subtle roar can be heard in the background. In the Terminal Room on Halo, you can occasionally hear that same distant roar that was present in Halo 2 and also Combat Evolved, and also the gentle pulsing of energy that's really soothing, but gives you a feeling of importance given your location. On Epitaph, you can hear the distant echoes of chanting Forerunner monks, while the enchanting sparkling of Gravlift seems almost fairy-like. At the same time, that all-too-familiar roar can be heard in the background. Now, whether it's the sound of wind bouncing off the walls and ceilings of the building or something totally different, it doesn't matter what it actually is. What does matter is that just a simple sound effect in the background really gets you thinking about its origin, and also the origin of the Forerunners. This is almost totally, and I mean almost totally, absent from Halo 5. The spawn room on the Breaking, a massive room with a shit ton happening in it, pulsing energy, rotating turbines, etc. And almost no sound, which is really weird. It's almost as if the loud screaming of the over-designed and exaggerated physical designs leaves no room for subtle ambience, or any form of ambience for that matter. Tyrant seems to be the only map with a significant Forerunner ambience, and I really do like what's there. You can hear a faint shuddering sound, quite similar to that of the Phaetons, and some sort of constant energy beam being run through the map. This map is definitely a step in the right direction in terms of the level of ambient sound. It just doesn't seem to incorporate many of the sound effects that describe the ancient mystery of the Forerunners. However, I really do like that shuddering sound. Can we get some more of that, please? I really like that. Okay, so I want to close this video with a personal, perfect example of how the Forerunner art style should look in order to serve its purpose, in order to sort of provide a basis and something that 343 can take inspiration from moving forward with Halo 6. This perfect example is Epitaph. Now, aside from being a goddamn beautiful map, This map is also the absolute epitome of perfection in terms of the Forerunner art style. It's vast both above and below, and gives you a sense of superiority that the Forerunners and their creations, although grounded sometimes, were often beyond human comprehension. This vastness is really enhanced by the distant echoes of movement and some sort of activity, along with the absolutely spine-chilling echoes of chanting Forerunner monks that echo throughout the tower, just like real-life monks chanting in a cathedral, which is, ironically, something that Epitaph seems to have taken quite a lot of inspiration from. The feeling of superiority is also resonated in the massive monasterial stained glass windows. The best thing about these designs of windows is that instead of being stained with ancient religious paintings or text, they're quite literally animated with information in the form of Forerunner glyphs. This is a really nice adaptation by Bungie. You get the sense that the Forerunners were almost medieval in their religion and worship, while at the same time were quite clearly technologically superior to anything medieval and humanity as it stands now. They gave the impression that the Forerunners were literally a futuristic high-tech version of middle-aged religious people. Absolutely genius. The walls aren't covered in excessive detail, they have very small subtle patterns in low detail areas, accompanied by murals of something completely beyond human interpretation, but you know had some real significance for the Forerunners. Areas where there's high detail and lots of accents serve a purpose. They aren't just random pieces of metal that were added at a 45-degree angle for seemingly no reason that massively protrude out of the wall. They're still subtle to a degree. They also look like another species' interpretation of library shelves, with the metal bars holding in vast amounts of information and glyphs behind them in the energy matrix. Honestly, this is one of my favourite things about this map. I could genuinely stare at these Forerunner library shelves for hours. The holograms look like something a Forerunner would study, like an ancient scripture or something. They're totally incomprehensible to a human, like I said before. They're literally just random shapes and glyphs to us, but their pattern and mix of colours makes you know they were more than that to the Forerunners, and that they have some super deep meaning to them. Also, the hologram of Bungie's Guardian is, as I've already said, absolutely beautiful, and I can imagine Forerunners worshipping it by the way of it being sat centre stage, resonating pure golden light like a holy relic. The animated floor and wall patterns do the living structure far better than moving floaty bits or 100 lens flares. They're subtle, almost quite peaceful, and not something that screams their presence at you. Hell, you probably didn't even notice them on your first couple games on this map, whereas in Halo 5, it's impossible to not notice them. Again, this really plays into the ancient mystery of the Forerunners, that information is embedded into the walls and that gentle energy is coursing through the floor gives every one of their structures a feeling of importance, but what makes them important is a mystery hidden behind 1,000 ancient glyphs. Honestly, I could go on forever about how fucking perfect Epitaph is, but for the sake of time, this video is already too long, so I'm gonna stop here because I think I've made my point more than apparent. And that's it. That's my argument for the classic Forerunner art style. I really hope I made you guys realise how goddamn beautiful it really is, especially compared to the new art style, and that maybe I converted some of you guys over to the iconic side. This isn't as cut and dry of an issue as the Elites though. The new Forerunner art style definitely does have a few redeeming qualities, as I've said. I just think that there's so much it's doing wrong in comparison, and that it should seriously take some inspiration from Halo 3's in Halo 6 in terms of both aesthetic and phonetic art style. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you've stuck around till the end, then man, you're a fucking trooper. If you did enjoy this video and agreed with any of the points that I made, then please do not hesitate to leave a like and also a comment with your thoughts, and also to share the video around with friends, 343 employees, literally anyone. Get the message out there that there is a lot of us who want the classic art style back. I mean, I think the views on classic art style videos kind of resonate this perfectly, but still, we need as many people in this... I fucking hate this term, but this movement as possible. God, that term is cringy. Thanks again for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Have an iconic day, as per usual, and I'll catch you next time.